Welcome to Stay at Home Wellness, where we talk about why wellness is so different for stay at home moms and what to do about it. I'm Hannah Stewart from wellnesswithhannah.com, and today we are talking about how to process a difficult birth. And when I'm talking about difficult, I'm not talking about something like a miscarriage or infant loss or something really tragic like that. I'm talking about something with birth where your birth story didn't go as planned in some way and you are struggling to process that. So, an example of this could be as simple as a mom didn't want to get an epidural and she got an epidural, or a mom didn't want a C-section and she got a C-section, or it could be there was some kind of complication with the pregnancy and the birth wasn't as magical as you wanted, right? So a lot of experiences with the NICU, and I'll go into mine later, but a lot of moms who have babies in the NICU, they don't get to hold their baby right away and they have to be intubated or on oxygen or on a feeding tube for a really long time. Breastfeeding is a lot more difficult. And so you have this kind of paradox where you're so thankful they're alive and you feel like in no way should you be complaining about these things. And at the same time, it feels really, really complicated because there are things you wish were different, but you also are so thankful and you don't want to not acknowledge that. And it's also very difficult because it bothers you sometimes. So some ways you might know you are struggling with processing a birth is if it brings you pain to think about the birth every time, but you also can't feel like you could fully express it. Maybe you don't like talking about it with people because it feels really, really complicated and hard to explain. I know for me, sometimes I feel like anytime I'm at a mom's group, especially, everyone goes around the room and they're sharing their birth stories. And my birth story with Elliot was pretty crazy. So they're all sharing their birth stories, and either I tried to really simplify it and say something like, oh, it had to be an emergency C-section, he had some problems, and then there's like judgment in the room, like, well, if you had just told the doctor XYZ, then you could have had a normal delivery if you had just held your ground. And then I'm like, well, no, like he was dying and it was really good that it was a C-section. And then sometimes I feel like I share like the whole story and then they're like, it kind of like kills the conversation, like it's a little bit too much. It can be a tricky thing when you're in a mom's group and you're sharing your birth story and it's clear it wasn't as ideal as some of the other moms in the group. It could be hard to know even how to express it in a helpful way and in a way that people will understand without being really judgy about it, right? Because moms can actually be quite judgy about birth, which has been a surprise to me, but it really can happen. And so that has been something I've had to navigate because I haven't had like your traditional birth scenarios going on. Another reason or way you might know you are struggling with processing your birth is if it's something you think about a lot, right? So maybe the birth happened a couple years ago, but it's still something that bothers you regularly. You think about it or have dreams about it. Sometimes that's a sign either there was some kind of trauma, in which case I would recommend you talk to a mental health counselor, or it was just something that you haven't really fully processed or been able to think through. Some of these situations could come up when the medical staff didn't make the best decision or you weren't sure they made the best decision. Sometimes you could agonize over, did you make the right decision in a certain case? Because obviously you as the mother have a lot of decisions to make with your child about when to go to the hospital, what to say to the medical staff, what to allow them to do, what not to allow them to do. And all of that is wrapped up when you're like having contractions and in pain, right? And so it can be really hard to process because on the one hand, you don't feel like you necessarily were like able to make all those decisions, but you did. So you have some responsibility. So it can just feel really, really complicated to a lot of people. And so I wanted to go ahead and share a little bit about my birth stories with my two boys. And then I want to jump into a few tips that have really helped me process my births better and that I hope will be helpful to you as well. So my oldest son, Elliot, is 3 now, and he was born at 34 weeks and spent 17 days in the NICU. And his birth was very crazy because he had an umbilical cord issue that they discovered at an ultrasound appointment. So we found that out at an ultrasound appointment. And they sent us to a specialist. So we thought, okay, we're just going to proceed here, figure out how to care for the baby. Then when we went to the specialist came in and said, you're in labor. You need to go to the hospital. And I had no idea I was in labor. So I felt a little bit bad about that just because I didn't even know I was in labor. And then this guy is telling me, you need to go to the hospital ASAP. And I was like, okay. So we went to the hospital and they checked me and I was dilated quite a bit. And they said, you are absolutely in labor. Like, we're having this baby tonight. So I was like, okay. This was 3 days before my my son's actual birthday. And then throughout the night, they would come in and they would tell me to change positions all the time because they said, oh, you're lying on your left side and the baby's heart rate drops when you do that. So don't lie on your left side, lie on your right side right now. And they would tell me all night long to change positions. Well, in the morning, a new doctor came in and he told me everything looks good. You can go home. And that was a really big shock to me because they had told me you're having the baby, but he was very confident and I was a very new mom. And I said, okay, if you say so, and I was really struggling when we went home. I actually remember crying with my husband, Kirk, the night we got home because I just felt all of this responsibility because when I had been at the hospital, they were telling me the baby's heart rate was struggling if I was lying on this side or that side. But of course, at home, I didn't have a baby monitor or a heart rate monitor on me. So I was like, I don't know if his heart rate is okay. Like, what if I'm killing him by sleeping on this side? And so we called and got a little bit more clarification from the doctor. But in the end, they said, no, you're fine. Stay home. So we stayed home for a day and Kirk actually prayed with me. And I still remember him praying because he was quoting, I think, I think it's Psalm 20, but it was the verse about some trust in horses, some trust in chariots. And when he was praying, he added in that some trust in doctors, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. And that was really, really comforting to me, just recognizing even if the doctor made the wrong decision, God is actually sovereign over the doctor. And it was really, really helpful to me at that time. And then we just prayed and prayed and prayed that if we needed to go to the doctor, God would make it really, really clear. And one Monday morning, that's 2 days later after we'd been in the hospital, I woke up and my son was always kicking and moving after breakfast, and I'd eaten a normal breakfast and he wasn't moving at all. And so I called the doctor. They told me, drink coffee, drink juice. I'd done all that and he wasn't moving at all. So we went in and we went to talk to the ultrasound tech. She did an ultrasound and he was looking really, really bad. His vitals were really bad. So they sent us over to the hospital immediately to have a C-section. When we were there, I asked, is he okay? Because his heart rate was dropping and they would not answer me. They would not tell me he was okay. They were freaking out because they were having me sign all these papers, giving consent to have a C-section. And then at the same time I was signing them, they were trying to get the IV in me as fast as possible. They were prepping me for a C-section. The anesthesia guy was there. I was just surrounded by all of these people and it was so stressful. And I remember them asking me, why are you so calm? And I was like, it is not me. I have been praying for a long time that God would give me peace during the birth. And that is exactly what he did. But I knew it was not me because the conditions were so stressful. But I just felt so much peace and calm during that birth. Looking back, I'm like, this is not normal, but I had no concept of what a normal birth was. Kirk arrives and they just do the C-section ASAP, and then Elliot immediately is wheeled away, but I heard him whimper a tiny bit, so I was like, he's alive! This is great! I just was so happy he was alive. It didn't even occur to me they're wheeling him away. I haven't really looked at him or held him or touched him or anything. And then they wheeled him into me right before they took off on the helicopter to go to the NICU. I was like, oh, there's Elliot. I was just, at the time, I was just so elated he was alive. I wasn't even necessarily processing how unusual of a birth that had been. And in so many ways, I see the Lord's hand in preserving his little life and making it clear when I needed to go to the doctor. And at the same time, looking back and now having had a second birth where I got to hold the baby right away, there's also some element of grief, right? Because I didn't get to hold him right away and I didn't get to bond with him for those 24 hours. I was just alone in the hospital room by myself because of COVID for the most part, although Jean came and visited me. So thank you, Jean, because Kirk went with him to go to the NICU. So we were separated. So I'm really thankful that the Lord gave me grace and joy during that season of time because I was really thankful he was alive. And so I really just felt absolutely elated at the time. And then looking back, it does feel a little bit complicated because I'm not exactly sure the doctor should have sent me home from the hospital the first time. And I'm not exactly sure I'm just not sure that should have been the way it was. And maybe I should have gone in sooner, so there's always questions like that. But then you see the Lord was sovereign over it and he preserved Elliot's life. So praise the Lord, right? But there's always that mix of longing for those first 24 hours with my baby or longing to have even been in the same room as him. So there's just some of those twinges, I would say, of this wasn't exactly as I would have imagined it. And at the same time, I'm so thankful and I see the Lord's hand in it. I think it's okay for those to be attention. And then fast forward to my son Jack's birth, and it was such an answer to prayer in so many ways again, because I went well past 34 weeks. He didn't have any problems whatsoever. I went into labor at 39 weeks, even though they were saying, oh, he's going to be big, you're going to need to do a C-section. I went into labor, which was super, super exciting. And then they only let me labor, I think, 2 hours. I got it out of 6. I progressed to an 8 really fast. And then after an hour, I had it progressed and they wanted to move immediately to a C-section. So we asked for more time. They gave us a tiny bit more time, but the whole time they were saying things like, you're killing your baby if you wait, or they weren't saying that exact. They were like, your baby, they were acting like we were jeopardizing our baby, right? So obviously that was really, really scary. So eventually they did decide to do the C-section, and, I'm not sure if that was the right decision or not. And I was talking to a doctor recently who does not think that was the right decision at all, right? So it was this weird thing because I was really stressed out. And so I actually was crying through my son Jack's birth, which I feel really bad about. Like, oh my goodness, my son's being born and I'm crying. But it was like a really hard thing to transition that quickly from like, oh, we're doing a VBAC, this is such an answer to prayer, to then, oh, they're doing a C-section. I don't even know if this is the right decision or not, but it's what Kirk and I decided based on what the doctor had told us. So again, with both births, there's like things where looking back, I'm like, I'm not really sure was that the right thing to do? Was this doctor right? Or was he wanting to go home because it was Sunday, go to church? And you don't want to assume bad motives. And again, I'm so thankful for another healthy baby. I know so many people don't have that, but I would say probably, as some of you can relate to, with both births, you could see how there were things that weren't perfectly ideal about either of them, but then there were also things that I am entirely thankful to the Lord for. So it could be difficult as a mom to process some of that. And so I did have Hey guys, I wanted to jump in and let you know about 2 opportunities that I have for you. So the first one is a free webinar that I've created just for stay-at-home moms who are wanting to learn more about wellness. And the reason is because I truly believe that wellness is totally different if you're a stay-at-home mom, because your life is so intertwined with your kids. And so I really don't think that a 20-year-old personal trainer, helpful as they are to so many people, if they don't understand what it's like to be a mom, it is very difficult to give wellness advice to a mom. So I created a whole webinar that dives into why wellness is different as a stay-at-home mom. It goes into how to wake up on time if you are struggling with that and are waking up with your kids and are in that vicious cycle of feeling stressed from the instant you wake up because your children woke you up through the baby monitor. That is not a good place to be, and I've totally been there. This webinar dives into working out postpartum. I know a lot of moms really struggle with overwhelm about where to start postpartum and have just gotten out of the habit totally of working out because they have a new baby, right? And all of their routines are different. How to develop routines when you are used to an employer developing them for you, and now you have to develop them for yourself, which is a huge change. And we even dive into getting things done with kids around. And the reason for this, even though it doesn't directly pertain to wellness, it absolutely affects your wellness routines, because if you cannot get anything done while your kids are awake and you feel like you have to be entertaining them 24/7, then you will not have time to have wellness routines, right? Because when your kids are asleep, you have to clean your whole house from top to bottom and cook all the meals, and you have no time while they're sleeping to work on any routines to take care of your own body, right? So in this webinar, I dive into all of that. I will link it below. The key with the link is click the link and then you wait for the pop-up, and then the pop-up is where you enter your name and your email address, and then it will give you a link that you can copy for the webinar. I think that was a little bit confusing for people last time, so I wanted to make that clear that that's how that works. So wait for the pop-up and then make sure to copy and paste the link, and you will be able to access that webinar, no problem. The second thing I wanted to let you guys know about is that if this episode or other episodes have really resonated with you at all, and you're recognizing that you're a mom that is struggling with wellness, this transition to motherhood has not been easy, and you need a little bit additional support, I would love it if you click the link below to book a call with me. I would love to be able to meet with you and be a habit coach for you, whether that's 1 time or 10 times, and be that support, because I know for me, sometimes I just need someone to talk to, even just for an hour, and to process, like, this is what I'm struggling with, and just problem solve with someone else. I'm a very verbal processor, and sometimes I just need someone to talk about things with and figure out, okay, this is the next step I should take, and then I'm good to go from there. So even if it's 1 time, that's totally fine. But if that interests you at all, I would love it if you went ahead and clicked the link below to book a call with me. Thank you guys so much. A lot of emotions, especially after Jack's birth and like leading up to his birth, even there's just a lot of difficult emotions to process because you're holding this adorable baby that you're so thankful for, but also you aren't sure you made some of the right decisions. So it just felt a little bit agonizing. So there are several things that have helped me with this that I wanted to share with you guys because I know there are people like that out there where whatever, maybe it was just a very small decision, but it still bothers you sometimes. There's some things that have helped me process it, even though it doesn't make all of the pain or lack of certainty go away. There are some things that have helped. So one of my first tips, if you are struggling with processing a birth similar to mine, where you have a healthy baby, a live birth, but it did not go exactly as planned, is to focus on gratitude to the Lord, because there is the verse that says, whatever is true, whatever is lovely, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is admirable, think about these things, right? And that's in Philippians 4, I believe. So it can be easy as a mom to fixate on the bad, right? So for me, it can be very easy for me to fixate on, did I make the right decision with letting the doctor do the C-section at that time? Or with Elliot's birth, I could fixate all the time on, did I do the right thing in letting the doctor send me home from the hospital early? So I can agonize over those things for a long time, but that's actually not productive, right? Because it happened in the past. It's not true. It's something that could have been true, but it's not currently true. And so thinking on and on and on about things that could have been true instead of things that are true actually causes a lot of pain and regret, right? So I have several decisions like that in my life where I tend to think about that a lot, like, oh, what could have been true if this was that way? But instead I need to be thinking about what is currently true. What can I do now? So even with Elliot's birth, he had some delays and things like that for being a preemie. And it was really, really important that I focus on not what could be true about Elliot's health in the future, but what is true, what is the information God has given me, and then what also is lovely, right? So with my birth, there are lots of lovely things about my birth that I am really thankful for, since I had 2 live births again. I know this is not the case for everyone, and this episode is not addressing miscarriage or something like that, and I in no way want to be insensitive to that. But this episode is specifically addressing moms that have had a live birth. So if you have a live baby in your arms, that is something lovely to thank the Lord for, right? If anyone's experienced the joy of snuggling a newborn, that is a good gift from the Lord, and he deserves gratitude for that good gift, right? So that has really helped me. Or to thank the Lord, wow, in both of these cases, there was some danger involved with Ellie. There was a lot more danger, there were all of these ifs, like if I had made this decision to go in later, he might not be with us, but it didn't happen because the Lord was sovereign and he made it clear to us when he needed to. And so just reflecting on, wow, God was so faithful. He answered that very specific prayer. He worked, even if the doctor made the wrong decision, he worked to preserve the life of my child. And that is really, really helpful. Or thinking about thankfulness that we live in a town where Elliot could be helicoptered to a NICU. Not every town has that option, right? Where there's a NICU close by, but we had that option. So being thankful for that, being thankful for the technology that preserved his life even when he was struggling so much, even with just taking in oxygen, right? Or being thankful that Kirk got, this is such a little thing, but Kirk got his work projects done before Elliot was born, and that was actually a really big deal at the time that we were praying for as well. So all those details working out was the Lord's provision. And so if I only fixate on the hard parts of the birth and I forget those things, that is actually not remembering the Lord's good work in my life, right? And it doesn't help us either. It doesn't make us better off. Like the people that fixate on those things all day, every day are some of the saddest people, right? Where they think about the would-haves and the could-haves and the should-haves. That actually can really hurt you spiritually and hurt you emotionally to where it's really hard to find joy, even if you are a Christian, if you are ever considering the work that the Lord has done in your life. My second idea, if you are struggling with processing your birth, comes from Psalm 62, but it talks about pouring out your heart in prayer to God. And I've actually had to do this a lot with both of my births, where there's just moments where it'll hit me like I didn't get to hold Elliot for the first 24 hours. Like maybe I know right before Jack was born, I heard all these happy birth stories about normal deliveries. And it just kind of hit me sometimes when I was watching them trying to like prepare for my next child. It would hit me. I didn't have that. And I would just start crying, So there would be times that I would just like pour out my my heart in prayer to the Lord and just say like, Lord, I really desire this for my next kid. If this is possible, please let this happen. Please let me be able to hold a child in the future right after they're born and get to experience that. And he did give me that with Jack, which I'm so thankful for. But just sometimes pouring out what is hard for you. With both kids, I've had to do that, where I do feel that angst of, oh, was that the right decision? Did I make the right decision with Jack? Did I make the right decision with Elliot? Did the doctor? I also give that to the Lord as well, like praying about it, just telling him, Lord, I am struggling with this. I do feel really sad about this, but I just pray that you would bear this burden with me, that you would take this burden from me, and that you would give me comfort right now. That can be really, really helpful in terms of just communicating your feelings to the Lord, because we see that in the Psalms, right? It's not just the psalmist is a stoic who never tells God how he's feeling and he never feels any emotion but joy. He does give his grief to the Lord. He asks him, have you forsaken me, quite often, right? Questions of deep longing or deep anguish or deep questions where he doesn't understand something. He does bring those to the Lord, which I really, really appreciate. And that actually leads me into my third point, because one of the people that did this, who's absolutely sinless, is Jesus, right? So he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's in the process of pouring out his heart to the Lord, saying that he did not desire to die, right? He did not want to be crucified, and he knew it was coming, and he knew how horrible it was going to be. And he poured out his heart to the Lord, but then he ended with, but not my will, but yours be done, right? And I think as Christians, this is actually really important for us. It's something that I have been convicted of recently. So often we just want to stop at pouring out our heart in prayer to God, and we just want to go on and on and on and on and on and on and on with our struggle, but we never actually bow the knee of submission to God and say, but you are God, so your decision was right. It was something, especially in the past, right? That decision was made by the Lord, how our child would be born. We're taking a quick break from our episode to let you know about our sponsor for today's episode, and that is Calm Max Trampoline. And I love this trampoline so much for kids. If you're thinking about getting them a Christmas gift or birthday gift, I know right now Christmas is just around the corner, but this trampoline is awesome for a variety of reasons. It's actually just an Amazon trampoline. We got it off of Amazon, which made it super easy because I brought it to our door, which I love. But what I especially love is that it has several features that are really helpful. So one of them is that it comes in a variety of sizes. So it comes from an 8-foot size where it's just for little kids to jump on. So I have friends that have this size, and I think all 4 of their kids jump on it together. They're like 8 and under, and they just love that. We got the 10-foot size, which is a little bigger, but still not crazy huge, and it has a net and everything. And I love it because my husband and I can jump on it with our kids, but it's still small, because I think a lot of people think of getting a trampoline as like this huge investment. It's going to take up all their yard if they don't have a very big yard. And we don't have a huge yard, but the 10-foot trampoline fits really nicely in it. There's still space in our yard for other things. It's not just the trampoline. And it's made a really, really big impact on our life because our kids spend more time outside. They ask to go outside more often. They want to jump on it with us, and they also can play on it independently. And that is because of the cool little ladder it has, where it has like actual almost like steps on the ladder. It's not just rungs. So even a 1-year-old can climb up it. I witnessed 2, my own kid and someone else's kid, climb up this trampoline. And so I remember the other day I was looking outside. I supervise my kids sometimes from the window, now that they're a little older and aren't putting things in their mouth. I looked outside and my kids are playing on the trampoline together because both of them can get on by themselves. And for toddler moms, this is a big win because most trampolines you either have to be able to pull yourself up on, which neither of my kids could do at this age, or you need someone to be out there constantly to boost you on and up. And I've been at other people's houses where they have a trampoline like that. And I know it's just a season, but I do love that they can just go out, get on independently, and have fun without needing me to mediate constantly. So if you are interested in that at all, go ahead, click the link below, and it will take you straight to the Calm Max trampoline that we personally have enjoyed. So thank you guys so much. Let's get back to our episode. There's a verse that has actually been really, really comforting to me from Proverbs 16:33, but it says, "The lot is cast into the lap, but the decision is from the Lord." And that has actually really helped me at times when doctors give you different statistics, because they have to give you statistics. So I remember with VBAC statistics, they're not really that fun to talk about because there's an XYZ percentage of uterine rupture, but then if you have another C-section, there's an XYZ percentage that this bad thing will happen in a future pregnancy, or that this bad thing will happen in this pregnancy. So there's all these percentages and risks, and the doctor's like trying to present them to you and then tell you what they think which risks are the better risk, right? And so it could feel like, oh, when you talk about it in terms of risk, it could feel like we're just flipping a coin, or flipping a certain number of coins for that percentage that they're giving you. But when you view it as, even when we flip a coin, God is deciding that sovereignly every time, that is actually a really, really helpful perspective. And it's not saying that. A lot of people think God's sovereignty is in contrast to personal choice, and it's not at all. They both exist. He's given us free choice, and he is completely sovereign. It's very hard to understand how they go together, just like a lot of other things with the Lord are hard to understand, but it's both. But he uses our free choice to bring about his will. And so that was actually really comforting to me. Even if I make the quote unquote wrong decision, it is still within God's will, if it's not immoral or something like that. And even if it was immoral or something, whatever, God could still use it for good for those who love him, right? So even if you were harmed by another human being, even if whatever, you got in a car wreck and your baby was born early, even if it was a circumstance outside of your control, God is sovereign over that as well. So I think that really, really has brought me a lot of comfort, instead of thinking, oh, it's just this percentage and the risks are so high, and imagining the worst case scenarios, or looking back and thinking about your percentage chance of success and how you failed. Thinking instead God was sovereign over this, and then bowing the knee to him in submission and saying, Lord, I know you did this for my good. Help me to trust you even when I don't see it. And just acknowledging to God, you are God, I am not God. Because so often when we are struggling with the ways that things have happened in the past for us, we are not acknowledging God's sovereignty. We are wanting to be God. We are wanting to time travel and change things, right? We are wanting to not be bound by time. We are not wanting to be bound by lack of information. We want to be like God. And so it's actually really, really comforting when you acknowledge, I am not in control. God is. He is sovereign. And that is a wonderful, wonderful comfort if you've had a birth that wasn't perfect, because you know he's working that for good in the lives of those who love him, right? So if you are struggling with processing a birth, I would love it if you went ahead and shared any comments below of things that have helped you. I'm always looking for ways to be encouraged and to encourage other moms in the same situation, because I know it is very difficult and very complicated for so many people. So I have a lot of compassion for you if you're in that boat. But if you did like this episode, please share it with a friend if you think it might be an encouragement with them, or leave a comment, like, review, whatever floats your boat today. So thank you all so much for joining me for another episode of Stay at Home Wellness.